Ooh, that looks tasty. Welcome folks, Today the Hungry Gamer is back with another crowdfunding preview, and today we're talking about Realm of Reckoning from IV Studio. And before I get started, I do need to point out that what you're looking at here is still in the prototype phase. Even though it looks real fancy, it is still in the prototype phase, and there will be some changes. Of note, I've already been told that these region lines here that you can barely see, separating all the regions, are going to be much more visible. And additionally, you'll notice I specifically picked these two colors here that I'm using, which can look a little bit similar, and those are going to be changed as well. So that will be fixed, so you will not hear me talk about that in my quills. And thank you to IV Studios for sending me this prototype so I can make this video. In any event, this is a 3 to 5 player game, though there is a 2-player version in the works right now of card drafting, and I'm going to say area control, but it's not area control in the way that you are thinking of area control. And at its core, as I said, you'll be drafting cards, and as you play through the game, you will be determining which of all the scoring conditions all over the board will be scoring in any given game, and that will determine how the game is won. Because at the very beginning of the game, there are actually no scoring conditions, and everyone starts with the points that they have, and that is simply it. Now, if you are not interested in how this game is played and want to jump into my final thoughts, then you want to go to the timestamp on the screen right now. For those of us still here, let's talk about how this game is played. So what you see here are 5 different regions in the realm. We have the pink, the dark blue, the light blue, the yellow, and the clay, the ochre, orange, brown, whatever. And you'll see each region has a track that goes with it, and over here we have some cards and some more cards, and every player has their own player board, which will determine their starting resources, which are listed over here. In this case, purple starts with a single pink warden, and over here it tells you what tracks they start up on, though in this case I've kind of just made up something so I can give the example of how the conflict works later on. And it also tells you where the acolytes start in which different regions. So in this case, purple actually would start with acolytes all over the board. Most of the factions don't start like that. But again, I've just put some out there so when I get to the actual conflict, I can show you how that's going to work. So the game's going to be played through 3 ages. And each age will consist of drafting and passing a series of cards. However, mixed in with each age's set of cards, there are what are known as reckoning cards. And I'm going to talk about how those work in just a bit. And so each age you will have 3 total reckonings. 2 that have been shuffled into the deck of cards, plus the final reckoning that you already know what it will be at the beginning of the age over here. And so you'll go through 3 reckonings. After 3 reckonings, you will do a scoring. Then you will go through 3 more reckonings for the second age and do more scoring. Then you will go through 3 more reckonings in the third age and you will do your final scoring. Now, before I'm going to talk about how the conflict works, talk a bit about how the card play works. So I'm going to slide this stuff out a bit and we'll take a look at a player board right here. So I've already told you about what all these symbols mean going around the edge. But what's going to happen is, on your turn, you will play a card. And there are basically 5 different types of things that you can collect from your cards. So what'll happen is you'll choose a card to play. And when you play your card, and everyone will pick their card, put it face down, and then in player order you'll play them. And so you'll get whatever is in the middle. So in this case, if I were to play that, I would get 3 coins. Or if I were to play this, and I'm purple, I could place 3 of my acolytes out onto the board wherever I want. And I'll explain what they do in just a bit, but you place them out wherever it is that you like, and I'll just toss them out. Doesn't matter for the moment. Or you might get a warden. And when you get a warden, if it is listed as white, you get to pick whatever color you want, and that is taking one of these guys here, and those are going to help you when you are participating in the conflicts and the reckonings. And we'll just say I'll take a pink one like so. Or you can gain cards. And these are mercenary cards. And they are all going to look like this with 2 colors on them for 2 different regions. And again, I'll just put those right here. Now, I would not be playing all of those at once. I would be playing one and then doing other things, and then we'd be passing cards and so on, but those are the different options. Then there's also a reckoning card, and I'm going to come back and talk about how when someone plays a reckoning card, it works. There's a little more that goes on after you play your drafted card, and you'll notice that there is light blue and there is yellow. And so what I will do is I'm going to pick where I'm going to slot this card. So we'll just say right here, I've decided to slot it under the board right here as yellow. And so what that will mean is I get to go up the yellow track right here one spot because there is a single up arrow there. So I would simply go up one like so. Or perhaps instead, slide this out of the way, I were to pick the brown right here and slide that under like so, you'll see there are two up arrows there. So I would go up 2 spaces on that track. And then you'll see there's a space for the light blue, the pink, and the dark blue, and they all have a variety of symbols on there and do various different things. Now, it is important to note that you can stack multiple cards underneath on a spot. In fact, you often need to do that in order to accomplish various scoring conditions. So you'll see I have 2 of those there, I have 1 card here, and nothing up there. And as I mentioned, in the hands everyone has, there will be 2 reckoning cards. So someone may choose to play a reckoning card. So when they play the reckoning card, one, they will get that card and it will slot under, like so, but then you will also do a reckoning. And let's talk about those right now. So the card that I showed you was a pink reckoning, which would happen up here, but just for the way my camera is, we're gonna say it's actually gonna be this burnt umber reckoning down here in this corner, because it's a little easier for me to show this on the camera. So I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. And so what's going to happen is the person who played it will then get to pick one of the rewards on this side of the board. And there's 3, one's just off camera right there. But we'll just say that they've decided that this reckoning is going to have this set of rewards. And I'll talk about what the rewards mean in just a minute. Then the next thing that the player that picked the reckoning is going to do is they're going to pick one of these pillars from somewhere else on the board and move it over into this region. And you can stack them up, but just for, since it's top-down view, I'll put it down like that. And so we'll just say that I pulled yellow over. And we'll also just say that earlier, in a previous reckoning, someone had pulled the pink over. And I'll explain what that means in just a moment. The next thing that every player is going to do is they're going to make a bid of how much power they can muster. I'm going to switch to the green one here. I think it's a little easier to see with the camera. And you can bid as much as you want. And the way you get your power are a few different ways. First off, you can use your coins for votes. 1 coin equals 1. The second vote you want is 2 coins, then 3 coins, and so on. So if I had 6 coins, I could potentially have 3 votes. Another way you get your votes are through your acolytes that you have in the region. So in this case, as the purple player, again, I'm showing the green one here because it's a little easier for us to see, I could have potentially 2 more votes. So we'll say I'm going to bid those also. So now I'm up to 5. Next, we look at the wardens that a player has. And let's just say that I happen to have a pink, a yellow, and a dark blue. And so there, since there is the yellow pillar, the umber pillar, and the pink pillar, I can use these 2 wardens if I so choose. So my blue one means nothing. Now these are interesting because just for having them, they're worth 1 power each. So I'd be up to 7. However, you can also sacrifice them for 3 votes. So let's say I really want this thing and I'm thinking I'm going to sacrifice these 2. So instead of being worth 2, they're going to be worth 6. So now I'm actually all the way up to 11. The next thing you can do, again, based on the color of pillars, is you can use your mercenary cards. And you can get 1 vote for each matching color. So this card here would be worth 2, 1, 2, and this card would be worth 1. So that'd be another 3 potential votes, which would put me up to 14. Then there is one last thing that you can use. For any of the colors that have the pillars, you can sacrifice your tracks here. So let's just say I'm going to try to make it an even 20, and I'm going to sacrifice 5 from here, doink, and 1 from right over here on the yellow, which you can't see. And now I have an even 20. That's my bid. Now here's the interesting thing. I don't spend any of that right away. I just showed all of that to show you how I got to this bid of 20. Then the other players will put in their bids, and then at the same time, we will all reveal. And again, pretend there's a third one. So 20 and 14, and we'll say the other bid was 22. So they are the winner. So with the 22, the first thing they have to do is prove they can pay for this. And they can pay for it however they want. For me, I demonstrated spending everything that I had here. Or they could decide, and anybody can do this, that you know what, they're going to keep all of their stuff because everything that I just used goes away. The only thing that is persistent if you use it is if you use a warden for its single vote power. So they could choose to take this negative penalty, -3 points, and keep all of their stuff, or they could pick one of the other two. The second one here, they could pick that and get 6 more acolytes out onto the board, or they could pick the top one, which is the monument. And the monument means they're going to turn on a scoring condition on the board. And there are more scoring conditions than you are ever going to activate in any given game. Because remember, you start with none activated, and then you wind up turning on 9 as you go through the game. So let's talk about the different scoring conditions very, very briefly and not in depth or detail, so we can, just so you have an idea of what's going on. And there are a whole bunch of them, and when you're scoring at the end of each age, in other words, after 3 reckonings have happened, you always start down here at this one here, because this is, if you've turned it on, whoever have the fewest points are going to get more points. Then we have ones that measure the tracks, so however high up you are on the tracks, which are the things that you spend potentially get more votes. You get points based on how high up you are. And again, you have the one for each of the different colors around the board. Then we have for the burnt umber color, you have a set collection. On their cards, there are little symbols at the bottom. And you can see I have a wild symbol here and this little rock. So there are different symbols, and as you get more of the different symbols, you will get more points. I will point out, though, that if that's turned on, the first 1 and 2 of these things get you negative points. Then we have down here, most coins get you points. I've already talked about all the tracks. Over here, we have the symbols on the bottom of the yellow cards, which are money bags, and whoever has the most of them gets 10 points, and whoever has the fewest of them gets -5 points. Over here we have an area control of acolytes in these bottom 3 regions. Up here we have the points based on the symbols on the light blue cards. There's 2 different kinds of symbols, and so you multiply them together, so you might get 0, you might get a lot. Up here we have the symbols on top of the pink cards, and if you have more than your neighbor, you're going to get points, and if you have fewer than your neighbor, you will lose points, and neighbors on both sides. Here you have points for sets of wardens, though only one of these can be activated. Up here we have area control for the top 2 regions. Over here we have points per card, points per mercenary card in your hand. Over here we have points for the dark blue symbols at the top of their cards. Again, you can only pick one of those. And over here we have points per card in your smallest stack. Your stack being these spaces around your board. And if you have 0 somewhere, it means you're going to get 0 points. The only other thing I will point out is that ties are both friendly and mean. Meaning, if 2 players have the same amount of gold, they'll both get the plus 12 points here. However, if, say, on this one over here, one player has 1 gold bag, and the other 2 players have 0, one player is going to get that plus 10, and both of the other players will lose the 5. And so you're going to play the game 3 rounds as you go through there. I did not mention these things over here, but these are, as people get highest up on these different tracks, they get to take these relics, and they are bonuses that get you more things, more coins when you get coins, and so on. I'm not going to go into those, but just know that the person who's highest up on these tracks, once you get to at least 3, is going to get those. And that's how this game works. So what do I like about this game? First of all, even though this is only a prototype in IV Games fashion, it is very, very pretty. Overall, with the exception of the few things I pointed out, like they need to clarify the lines, which they already said they're doing, it is very, very clean, very clear, and very easy to figure out what it is that everything means. And as I said, I think it's very, very pretty. I love those big old chonky meeples you got. I really like the way that the cards kind of slide under the board. You have the double-layered board, but it's just kind of like raised up a little bit. Very, very clever. Really like the way that works. I also love the core mechanic or the core conceit of this game, which is at the beginning of the game, there is no scoring. None. But what you're doing is throughout the game, you are creating the scoring conditions. So part of the game becomes picking scoring conditions when you win those monuments to place them on something that will benefit you and hurt the other players. That's really, really clever and really adds to the player interaction in this area control style game, but in an area control style game that there's no conflict. There's no direct conflict. You are spending your stuff and you are the one responsible for things being removed from the board. I really, really like that. It also uses I'm going to call it the Sushi Go style drafting. I'm sure everything uses that style drafting, but it reminds me of Sushi Go in the sense that you have multiple different rounds where things are slightly different. I like the way that works. I like that regularly you have a very hard choice to make of, do I want to call this reckoning now? Because I know it's here. Or do I want to try to buff myself up for another reckoning that might be coming around down the way? Or is it I really want this reckoning to happen, and I think if I play my cards right, I can wait until it gets back to me. I think it's going to come back around. And I really like that hard decision. The center of the cards is usually a pretty easy decision, especially once you start getting the relics. Like in the last game I played, I lost, but I had the relic for the whole game from the dark blue region, which allowed me to get extra cards. So anytime I could get cards, I was getting cards, and I was just pumping up my armies, and I was actually playing with very few acolytes and very low amounts of money because I had these cards, and I was just chucking these cards up. And that really, really works well, and I neglected to say, there's also the person who calls the reckoning gets to choose what other color is going to be active in the zone. Again, it's really, really clever for what is at its core a very simple game. I also really appreciate the way that the different tracks work. Again, that's part of the decision you're making. What scoring conditions are unlocked, so maybe you want to take the ochre color down at the bottom and use that because it have another symbol because you know someone's unlocked that scoring condition that can be brutally negative to you. Or maybe someone has unlocked the dark blue eyes, and so you want to start getting those. So you're looking at the scoring condition, but you're looking at the tracks, and you're looking at the tracks because, one, they may be scoring conditions, but also you're going to use those to try to win those fights at the end. And I really appreciate the way the fights work. I like that you're kind of sussing things out, you're making your bids, you're putting it out there. There's not really any penalty if you screw it up other than your number goes down to what it could be, and then you got to spend everything that you could. So not a huge penalty because at the end of the day, bad math doesn't really hurt you because it's just, oh, you had bad math, so actually this person goes first. So I like the way all of that works, but mostly it's coming down to I really, really like the way that you are choosing between all those scoring conditions, and the ones that you pick early, you're going to score 3 times. The one that get picked later, only going to score once. Just very clever across the board. I really do enjoy the way all of that works. So what are my quibbles with the game? Well, the first one is it's a 3 to 5 player game. They're working on a 2-player version, and there's no solo in sight, and I don't know that I'd want to play this game necessarily solo, but I wish there were some bots, and that's not something that they have. That is a personal preference. I know that the Ivy Games design team, they don't like having bots that you activate. I personally do. I wish they were there. They're not. Whatever. I'm also holding out hope for some mini modules down the way to kind of further differentiate these different factions, because right now you just kind of start with different setup, and it does matter early in the game, and the way you start differently early in the game can kind of send you in different directions, but maybe some kind of mini module that further differentiates them. I love asymmetric factions, so I will always be here for that if that's something that comes out of here. But really, my only substantive quibble is one that I bring up often, and it comes down to the group that you're playing with. There could be some serious AP in this game, because as you're getting to the point where you're trying to pick the scoring conditions mid and late game, sometimes it's okay, what's going to help me, or at the very least hurt them, but if that hurts him, it will actually help him, and then it's going to do nothing to her, but it does kind of close the gap on her. And so there's a lot of potential AP that can happen once you get those scoring conditions you're starting to assign them. And I actually found sometimes, as I was waiting for it to come around to my turn and my bid, because I didn't bid as high, I suddenly was like, oh gosh, I forgot what my plan was on this bid. So there can be a little bit of AP going on in kind of the tense moments. Now, with that said, the second game that we played yesterday, and because I had some people over and we played multiple games in a row, the second game that we played, even with some of these moments, we played in about an hour, maybe 50 minutes. It was only a 3-player game, but still, about 50 minutes. So it's not a long game. I think it says 90 minutes on the box, and that's probably true with a 4 or 5-player game. But there is potential, as I say, for some AP, depending on who it is that you're playing with. And then the only other minor thing is this is more of a skill thing, but there is some skill to this game in the sense that you can just paint yourself into a corner and just find yourself trying to dig out of a hole because you made bad choices. But again, that's nothing about the game. That's just understand that that's something that is possible. But there you have it, folks. For my money, this might be their best game yet. Now, I haven't played Brink. I don't know anything about that one. That's the kind of, I guess that's their biggest game. So I haven't played that one. So maybe that one. But I think this one might be their best game yet. It's very, very clever. It's very fast. And I'm excited I get to hold on to this prototype for a while and I get to keep playing. So there you have it, folks. That is Realm of Reckoning. As always, if I've made any mistakes in the rules overview, please let me know in the comments with the timestamp so I can get that in the Klingon subtitles. If you found this video useful, please like, subscribe, share, maybe become a channel member. As always, thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.